The crystal chandelier shimmered above me like 1,000 eyes, all of them watching. I stood beside Marcus Webb, the man I'd agreed to marry in 2 months, my fingers laced with his, as waiters circulated with champagne flutes. My mother's locket burned against my collarbone, warm as a heartbeat, as if even she couldn't bear to witness what was about to unfold. The ballroom of the Grandmont Hotel was a constellation of gold and ivory. 200 people I'd known my entire life mingled and laughed, celebrating what should have been the happiest night of my life. My engagement, my future, my forever. Then Vivian glided to the microphone in a crimson dress that clung, like sin itself, my older sister. My beautiful, brilliant, utterly merciless sister. "I think it's time," she said, her voice sweeter than champagne, "that everyone knew the real reason we're celebrating tonight." The room stilled. I felt Marcus's hand tense in mine. "Because Marcus isn't just Charlotte's fiancé," Vivian continued, her smile poisonous. "He's been mine for the past 8 months." The silence was a living thing. The violinist's bow froze mid-air. Marcus's hand slipped from mine. For a heartbeat, there was only the fizz of champagne and the sound of my own breathing, fast, ragged, unraveling. "Don't look so shocked, darling," Vivian said, tilting her head with mock concern. "You always did live in your little dream world. Marcus just needed someone more present." She smiled, slow, deliberate, victorious. And that smile told me everything. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It was calculated, weaponized, revenge for something I'd never even done. Laughter rippled through the crowd, nervous, uncomfortable laughter that only made it worse. I looked around the ballroom, searching for an ally, and found only strangers. Even my father looked away. I couldn't breathe. The room tilted. "Excuse me," I whispered, though no one heard me, and I walked toward the exit with what remained of my dignity. Behind me, Vivian's laughter followed like a ghost. I don't remember leaving the party. Only the cold night air scraping my throat as I stumbled through the lobby and into the parking garage. My engagement dress, white silk, a dream I designed myself, now felt like a costume for a play that had just ended in catastrophe. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel of my car. The dashboard lights blurred into streaks of color. I sat in the driver's seat for 20 minutes, just breathing, just trying to exist in a world that had fundamentally broken. My phone buzzed. A text from Vivian. "You overreacted. It's not that deep. We just connected. He came to me first, remember? You pushed him away." The audacity twisted my stomach. I typed and deleted a dozen responses, each one more desperate than the last, before I threw the phone onto the passenger seat. My reflection in the rearview mirror was a stranger, eyes red, lips trembling, the bright hope I'd carried just hours ago, now dead as ashes. When I finally drove home, the city streets were quiet and slick with rain. The house was dark except for the porch light Father always left on, a habit he maintained to be charitable, though we both knew it was really for Vivian, the good daughter, the successful one, the one who won. I sat in the driveway for an hour after the engine died, staring at the house where I'd grown up, wondering how the people inside it could betray me so completely. Deep inside me, beneath the shock and humiliation, something cold and sharp began to take shape. A voice that whispered, "Not forever. She won't get away with this forever." Father didn't ask if I was okay. He simply folded the morning paper and said, "Your sister told me what happened. You shouldn't make scenes in public." I stared at him across the kitchen table, certain I'd misheard. Make scenes? "Dad," she announced she was sleeping with my fiancé at my engagement party, in front of 200 people. He sighed, irritated, as if I were being unreasonable. Vivian said Marcus came to her first, that he wasn't happy. Maybe you pushed him away. You've always been. He paused, searching for the word. Sensitive. Sensitive. His favorite word for weak. For broken. For not good enough. The grief lodged in my throat like gravel. The kitchen smelled of his black coffee, the same scent that had filled my mornings during childhood. But those mornings had been different then. I'd been different. Vivian had been the one demanding his attention with her accomplishments, and he'd given it freely. When I'd come home with good grades, he'd barely looked up from his newspaper. She humiliated me, I whispered. You'll move on, he said, adjusting his cufflinks with mechanical precision. Focus on something practical. That blog of yours isn't real work, Charlotte. It never will be. The words landed like bullets. My blog, The Quiet Truth, was the one corner of my life that was entirely mine. I'd started it after our mother died, a place to write about healing and honesty and the messy truths families never discuss. I had 15,000 followers, real followers, people who found meaning in my words. But to him, it was worthless. When he left for his office, I stood by the sink in silence, staring at the mug he'd left half empty. My mother's photo smiled from the mantel, gentle, kind, gone for 3 years now, but somehow more present than anyone alive in this house. I wish you were here, I murmured to her picture. You'd believe me. You'd fight for me. Outside, the wind rattled the window. Inside, something in me cracked wide open. The week that followed was a blur of pain and humiliation. Vivian called twice, her voice dripping with fake concern. The first time she said, "Hey sis, we should talk. You're making everyone uncomfortable with this drama." I laughed, bitter, broken. Drama? You announced your affair at my engagement party. Oh, come on, she sighed, as if I were being unreasonable. You always make yourself the victim. Marcus said you were distant, cold even. I just filled the space he needed. Her words slithered through the phone line like poison. I could picture her perfectly, her perfect manicure, her perfect posture, that slight pout she used whenever she wanted someone to believe her lies. You planned it, I said quietly. You enjoyed watching me fall apart. Silence, then a low, satisfied chuckle. If you weren't so fragile, maybe you'd keep people around. Anyway, Dad thinks you should apologize for storming out. You embarrassed the family. I ended the call without responding. The second time she called, I didn't answer, but I listened to her voicemail 3 times, each listening a fresh wound. Charlotte, I'm trying to help here. You need to accept reality and move forward. Holding grudges only hurts you. I'm the one who should be upset. You made this so awkward for everyone. Gaslighting. Classic, polished, cruel gaslighting. She was rewriting the narrative, twisting reality until I questioned my own pain, making me the villain in my own story. I pressed my forehead to the cold window of my bedroom, breathing hard. Below, the garden mother had once tended lay wilted and dead. I hadn't watered it since she passed, and neither had anyone else. She won't get away with this, I whispered into the silence. I promise you, Mom. She won't. For the first time, the thought didn't sound impossible. It sounded like a vow. On the 8th day, I packed a suitcase. No plan, no destination, just the desperate need to escape a house that reeked of betrayal and indifference. I'd called Eleanor Blake, an editor I'd connected with at a writing conference years ago, and she'd offered me her guest apartment for as long as you need. No questions asked, just kindness, the kind I'd forgotten still existed. Father didn't stop me. He barely looked up from his paper as I dragged my suitcase toward the door. Vivian's car was in the driveway when I stepped outside. She rolled down the window, lips curved in that same smug smile, the one that had haunted my nightmares. Running away, she called out. Classic you. You'll come crawling back once you realize no one cares about your little feelings. Or your little blog. The mention of my blog stung more than it should have. The Quiet Truth was the only pure thing left in my life, a space where I wrote about healing without pretense, about honesty without performance. I turned to face her, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm done letting you define me, Vivian. I'm done letting this family tell me who I should be." She laughed softly, a sound like breaking glass. "Sure, sweetheart. We'll see how long that lasts." I turned away before she could see the tears forming. The suitcase handle bit into my palm as I walked toward the taxi waiting at the curb. Each step away from that house felt like ripping off a bandage, painful but freeing. Behind me, I heard her car door open. "You won't survive on your own," she shouted. "You need this family." I didn't turn around, but I smiled because in that moment I realized the truth. I'd already survived the worst thing she could do to me. Everything else would be building. Eleanor's guest apartment was small, but perfect. Bright windows overlooking the city, bookshelves that smelled like possibilities, a desk by the window where the light pooled like liquid gold. "Stay as long as you need," Eleanor said, pressing a key into my hand. She was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and kind eyes that had seen enough heartbreak to understand mine without explanation. No rent, no timeline, just heal. I burst into tears the moment she left. It took 3 days before I could look at my blog without feeling sick. But on the 4th day, I opened my laptop and started to write. Not about engagement parties or betrayal, not yet. Just raw fragments about grief and family and the way people who are supposed to love you can become weapons. I published the first post anonymously on a small women's forum, buried deep where no one from my old life would find it. The response was immediate and overwhelming. "This is my sister. This is my mother. This is my entire childhood." Hundreds of women found themselves in my words, and in their validation, I found something I'd lost, my voice. 3 weeks into my sanctuary, I received an email that changed everything. Subject: "Your words moved me. Dear C, I found your post on the Women's Forum and have read it 4 times. Your writing is raw, extraordinary, and captures something women rarely admit out loud. The way family betrayal cuts deeper than any other wound because it comes wrapped in loved. I'm Eleanor Blake, editor of The Daily Voice, a digital storytelling platform dedicated to amplifying authentic female narratives. We reach over 2 million readers monthly. Would you consider publishing more pieces with us? Your voice deserves to be heard. I believe you have something important to say. Warm regards, Eleanor Blake, The Daily Voice." I stared at the screen for a long time, my tea going cold beside me. Someone had seen me, not the broken, humiliated sister, but the woman beneath the wreckage. Someone believed in my words enough to take a chance. With trembling fingers, I typed back, "Yes, I'd love to share more." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in Eleanor's guest bed and imagined what might happen if I told the truth. The real truth, not hidden behind anonymity and vague references, but raw and honest and undeniable. The thought terrified me, but beneath the terror was something stronger: hope. The first essay I published with The Daily Voice was titled "The Gaslighting That Sounds Like Love." I described in careful detail the subtle cruelty of a person who makes you question your own memory, your own worth, your own reality. I didn't name Vivian. I didn't have to. By morning, the post had 15,000 views. By the next day, 50,000. The comments flooded in like a confession booth. "This is exactly what my sister does to me. My mother made me doubt my own sanity like this. I thought I was crazy until I read this." Eleanor called, her voice warm with excitement. "Charlotte, your stories are resonating on a level we rarely see. Readers are sharing them with their therapists. Women are having breakthroughs. We'd like to feature you more prominently, under your real name if you're ready." I hesitated, phone pressed to my ear, staring at the framed photo of my mother on Eleanor's desk. She'd been gone 3 years, but her eyes in that picture still held strength, still held pride. "I'm ready," I whispered. The next week, Charlotte Pierce returned to the world, not as a victim, but as a Voic. 2 months later, Vivian invited me to dinner. The message was short, elegant, and manipulative, Let's put the past behind us. Dad wants us to be sisters again. I miss you. Against every instinct, I went. Some part of me still believed in the possibility of reconciliation. That same naive part that had once believed my family would have my back. The restaurant was upscale, the kind of place Vivian preferred. White tablecloths, dim lighting, the appearance of civility. Father sat at the head of the table, older somehow, his eyes avoiding mine. Vivian glowed in designer beige, every inch the successful woman she'd constructed herself to be. So, she began, swirling her wine glass, I saw your little stories online. Impressive. You've always been good with words. Thank you, I said carefully. She smiled, the corners of her mouth tight. Just be careful. Some of your readers might think you're airing family drama. That could damage reputations. My fork froze midair. Are you threatening me? Of course not. She laughed, that musical laugh that made my stomach turn. Just sisterly advice. You've always been so sensitive. I looked around the table. My father said nothing. The silence was deafening. Vivian leaned closer, her perfume nauseatingly sweet. Some of us were born to shine, Charlotte. You were born to write about it. That night, I drove home shaking, but underneath the hurt, something stronger stirred. Anger transforming into purpose. She'd given me the final piece of the puzzle. She'd made herself my muse. By autumn, I stopped hiding. I moved my essays from the Daily Voice to my own dedicated platform, The Quiet Truth, Reclaiming Your Voice. It started as a simple Substack, but readers migrated en masse. What began as personal essays evolved into something more powerful, a digital sanctuary for women who'd been silenced, gaslit, and made small by people who claimed to love them. Each post was a mirror that Vivian would eventually be forced to look into. I wrote about the subtle violence of narcissism disguised as love, about how powerful women sometimes use their power to crush the competition, especially within their own families, about the cost of complicity, the weight of silence, the courage required to speak. I never named Vivian. I didn't have to. My readers began connecting dots. Comments appeared. Is this about that CEO at Women and Work magazine? The one who just got exposed for workplace harassment. Vivian had moved up in the world. She was now the VP of marketing at Women and Work magazine, a company that publicly championed female empowerment. The irony was delicious. One evening, Eleanor called. Charlotte, your blog has become something rare. You've created a space where women feel safe being honest. You've outperformed every other writer we've worked with. I think it's time to talk about a book deal. A book deal. My own book, telling my own truth on my own terms. Yes, I said. Let's do it. The email arrived 6 months later. Dear Ms. Pierce, we at Women and Work magazine would like to invite you to be featured in our special edition, Voices Redefining Empowerment. We'd love to do an in-depth interview and photo shoot with you, the woman behind The Quiet Truth. This would be our cover story. The interview would take place at our downtown studio. Sincerely, Margaret Chun, Editor-in-Chief. I stared at the email for a long time. The magazine was Vivian's company, and they didn't know who I was. Not yet. I replied with one condition. I'd be honored. However, I'd like to appear alongside another voice, someone who's experienced workplace toxicity and survived it. I believe in amplifying shared truths. They agreed immediately. I knew exactly who that voice would be. The night before the shoot, I stood in front of my mirror and barely recognized myself. Gone was the fragile, broken woman who'd fled her family's house a year ago. In her place stood someone else. Someone with fire in her eyes and steel in her spine. I'd built something. Not just a blog or a book deal or a following. I'd built a life. A real one. A true one. I thought of all the women who'd written to me, who'd found strength in my words, who'd left toxic relationships and toxic families because they realized they deserved better. That was power. I selected a white suit, simple, clean, quiet authority. I did my makeup carefully, deliberately, not for anyone else. For myself, for the woman I'd become. The studio was all glass and steel and cold professional lighting. It sat on the 43rd floor of the downtown high-rise where Vivian had her office. My heart was steady as I walked through the doors. I didn't recognize Vivian at first. She stood near the makeup station, reviewing notes for the shoot, wearing a tailored black dress. Then she looked up and froze. Color drained from her face. "Charlotte," she whispered. I smiled. "Hello, Vivian. I believe we have an interview to do." She blinked, trying to regain control, but I saw the moment she understood. The moment it clicked. The girl who'd been too broken to fight back had become a woman with a megaphone. I didn't realize," she started. "I know," I said softly. "You never do." The camera crew assembled. Margaret Chen, the editor-in-chief, approached me with warm enthusiasm. "Charlotte, thank you for doing this. We've been following your work for months. Your voice is exactly what this magazine needs to feature." Vivian's jaw tightened. The interview began in front of the cameras, bright lights reflecting off the glass table between us. The interviewer, a sharp woman named Sarah, started gently. "Charlotte Pierce, the writer behind The Quiet Truth. Welcome. Can you tell our readers what drew you to start your blog?" I took a breath and began to speak truth into the light. "I started The Quiet Truth after experiencing a very public betrayal," I said, my voice steady. "Someone I loved, someone who was supposed to have my back, chose to humiliate me in front of everyone I knew. And instead of supporting me, the people around me asked me to be quiet about it, to protect the reputation of the family, to pretend it didn't happen." I paused, looking directly at Vivian. But silence is how abuse thrives. Silence is how manipulation wins. So I decided to stop being quiet. Sarah leaned forward. "Can you tell us more about that betrayal?" "It involved my sister," I said, "and my fiancé, and a very public announcement at an engagement party that shattered my life in real time." Vivian's face had gone white. "The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself," I continued. "It was the gaslighting that followed. Being told I was too sensitive, that I was making scenes, that I was the problem for not accepting it gracefully. When you're gaslit by family, you start to question your own reality. You start to believe that your pain doesn't matter." Sarah's eyes widened. "And how did you move past that?" "I wrote about it," I said simply. "I gave it a shape and a name. And when I did, thousands of women found themselves in my words. They realized they weren't crazy. They weren't too sensitive. They were just trapped in situations designed to make them small." I turned to look directly at Vivian. "The most powerful thing about truth is that it has its own momentum. You don't have to fight for it. You just have to speak it and get out of the way." Vivian's hands were shaken. Gee. The interview continued for another 20 minutes, but the power dynamic had shifted completely. I talked about my book, about the thousands of women who'd reached out with their own stories, about the work I was doing to support young female writers from difficult families. When it ended, Sarah turned to Vivian. "Vivian Pierce, you're the VP of marketing for this magazine, which champions female empowerment. I have to ask, did you know this interview would feature your sister? The woman whose betrayal you've just heard described." Vivian's voice came out strained. Charlotte and I have had our differences, but did you know that several of your employees have reported a toxic work environment?" Sarah interrupted gently, "that there are allegations of manipulation and gaslighting." The color completely drained from Vivian's face. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her voice cracked. "We have documented interviews with 5 former employees," Sarah said, "all describing patterns of emotional abuse, all noting that you encouraged competition between women rather than collaboration, all describing a workplace culture that mirrors the very tactics you used against your own sister. The silence was absolute. I watched Vivian's carefully constructed world crack open. Watched her try to find her footing and fail. "This interview is over," Vivian said, standing abruptly. "Actually," I said quietly, "I think it's just beginning." The magazine issue hit newsstands on a Tuesday. By Wednesday morning, the woman who found her voice was trending on every social media platform. Clips of the interview went viral, particularly the moment when the alleged workplace toxicity was revealed on camera. Vivian's company issued a statement. "These allegations are unfounded and part of a coordinated smear campaign by disgruntled former employees." Classic gaslighting. She'd perfected the art of rewriting her wrongs. But the women who'd worked for her had their own voices now, and they weren't staying silent. One by one, they gave interviews. Holly, a former intern, described the day Vivian had made her cry in front of the entire office, and then told her she was too sensitive for corporate America. Another woman, Jessica, detailed how Vivian had stolen her ideas and presented them as her own. A third, Diana, described being demoted after she pushed back on unethical practices. The narrative flipped overnight. By Friday, Women and Work magazine's board of directors called an emergency meeting. By Monday, Vivian had resigned to pursue other opportunities. But the damage was done. Her reputation was in ruins. Companies that had courted her for speaking engagements quietly canceled. Her book deal, she'd apparently been working on one, was shelved indefinitely. I didn't celebrate. I simply let her face the consequences of her own choices. 2 weeks after the interview aired, Vivian called me. It was late at night, and I almost didn't answer. "Charlotte," she breathed, her voice trembling. "Please, tell them to stop. You're ruining me." I said nothing. Sometimes silence is the most powerful response. "You don't understand what you're doing," she continued, her tone shifting, becoming syrupy, manipulative. "You're destroying family. You're destroying everything we built." "Family," I whispered. "You destroyed that the night you took Marcus from me. The night you humiliated me in front of everyone I knew. The night you showed me that your ambition meant more to you than my dignity." There was a pause. When she spoke again, her voice was hard. "You'll regret this. You think they love you now, but they'll turn on you too. Everyone always does." "Maybe they will," I said quietly, "but at least they'll know who I really am. At least I won't have to perform perfection or hide my truth anymore." I hung up. The silence afterward felt cleaner than forgiveness ever could. 6 months later, I attended a charity gala, the same annual event where Vivian used to be the keynote speaker. Her chair sat empty. People I barely knew approached me throughout the evening, thanking me for my words, saying I'd given them courage to leave toxic bosses, manipulative relationships, or loveless homes. Each story felt like a healing salve. Near the end of the night, my father approached me. He was older now, grayer, smaller somehow. His shoulders carried the weight of finally understanding what he'd refused to see before. "Charlotte," he said, voice shaking, "I was blind. I believed her lies. I let you down when you needed me most. I'm sorry." I looked at him for a long moment, really looked at him. I saw regret in his eyes. Real regret. "You can't unraise a hand that hurt Dad," I said softly. "But you can stop pretending it didn't. You can start honoring the truth instead of protecting the lies." He swallowed hard. "She's lost everything." "I know," I said. "Sometimes that's the only way someone like Vivian learns what truth feels like." I didn't hug him, but I nodded, acknowledging the beginning of his reckoning, and walked away before the tears came. My book, The Quiet Truth, Finding Strength After Betrayal, hit the shelves on a Tuesday morning in spring. The cover showed a soft light breaking through fog. Inside, I'd written honestly about every aspect of my journey. The engagement party, the family abandonment, the year of isolation and healing, the moment I found my voice, and the strength it took to use it. I didn't write it as revenge. I wrote it as resurrection. On the morning of the release, I visited my mother's grave. The grass was damp, the air full of that early spring stillness that feels like forgiveness. I laid down a copy of the book beside fresh flowers. I kept my promise, Mom, I whispered. I told the truth. As I stood there, a soft wind passed through the trees, and for the first time in years, I felt peace instead of pain. I didn't need to destroy Vivian. She'd done that herself. I only needed to rise, and rise I had. 3 years later, the bookstore smelled like coffee and paper and rain. A line of people curved past the shelves, each holding a worn copy of The Quiet Truth. Some with notes scrawled in the margins, others highlighted with passages that had changed their lives. I signed another book for a young woman who looked to be about 25. She had bright eyes, but they trembled with vulnerability I recognized immediately. "Your words got me through my breakup," she whispered. "I thought I was crazy, but you made me feel seen." I squeezed her hand gently. "You were never crazy," I said. "You were just made to doubt your light by someone who couldn't handle its warmth." She laughed softly through her tears, and I watched her walk away with something glowing in her chest, hope. That fragile, precious thing I'd fought so hard to reclaim. After the signing, I stepped outside. The city glowed in twilight, lights flickering like 1,000 small mercies. Eleanor, now my publisher and dear friend, waited for me at the cafe down the street. We'd built something beautiful together. A platform, a movement, a safe space for voices that refused to be silenced. My heart was steady. My past had lost its sting. Vivian lived quietly now, somewhere on the other side of the country. No more headlines. No more cameras. I'd heard she'd started therapy, that she was doing the deep work required to understand the damage she'd caused. I hoped it was true, not for my sake, but for hers, and for the people around her. I'd learned that revenge isn't about making them suffer. It's about walking away whole. Finally free. Finally you. I sat down across from Eleanor and smiled. Outside, the rain continued its gentle percussion against the windows. Inside, I was warm, safe, home in my own skin. "How does it feel?" Eleanor asked, "to have told your truth?" I thought for a moment, considering the question with the care it deserved. "Like coming home," I said finally. "Like remembering who I was before anyone told me who I should be." Eleanor raised her coffee cup in a quiet toast. I raised mine to meet it. "To the quiet truth," she said. "To the quiet truth," I echoed. And in that moment, I realized something simple but profound. The girl who'd been mocked for her little blog had become a woman who'd used her voice to change lives, including her own. They broke me to silence me, but in the quiet I found my voice, and it was louder than their lies ever were. Respect is non-negotiable, not for the people who hurt you, but for yourself. Your worth isn't defined by anyone else's seating chart or who your family believes first. My story proves silence can be a weapon and patience can be power. I was silent for a year, not from weakness, but from building, gathering words like ammunition. Every post was a brick. Every reader a witness proving I wasn't alone. The people who gaslit me wanted me broken and compliant. I chose differently. I chose the quiet revolution. Your silence doesn't make you weak. Your boundaries don't make you difficult. Your survival makes you extraordinary. If this resonated with you, share it with someone gaslit into invisibility. Tell them they get to write their own ending, not the one scripted for them, but the one where they find their voice and use it. Tell them the revolution happens when you decide to write your own ending. I see you. I believe you. Your worth was never in question. Subscribe for more stories about setting boundaries, finding your worth, and turning humiliation into triumph. Every day, I share stories of women who refused silence, chose themselves, and became plot twists in their own narratives. Your story matters. Your voice matters. And the world is waiting. One quiet truth at a time, we're changing everything. Thank you for believing. Thank you for staying.